Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we're going to get the show going. If everybody will please mute so that there's no interference from home. I am Fred Moore with the Friends of Northeast Philadelphia History and the Northeast Philadelphia History Network. I am, we're doing a little different tonight. Always we do a little different, right? Still admitting people here. I'm at the church actually, because the weather wasn't that bad, but we were really unable to change it back again. But I came here to host from here, and in case some people showed up, and a couple did, though they can't see it because I don't have it hooked up on the TV yet, but we won't go through all of that. Let me hand this over to Jack McCarthy, our former president, and he will introduce Margaret Jerrido.
Oh, thank you, Fred, and welcome everybody. Just a reminder that if you would post your questions in the chat box, we will get to them at the end. And sometimes at the end, we unmute people if they need to ask a question live, but generally we reserve questions until the end and we answer them through the chat box. So yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Margaret Jerrido, who I've known for, geez, how many, I can't even think how many years I've known Margaret, but I first knew her when she was the director of the Urban Archives at Temple University, which is now called the Special Collections Research Center. And she was the director there for many, many years and helped many researchers in their quests for, access to the phenomenal collections there at Temple. And then she retired from that and has been working with a number of Black institutions as their archivist. Both her main gig now is she's the archivist for Mother Bethel, which you'll hear all about, Mother Bethel AME Church, as well as the consulting archivist for the Philadelphia Tribune, Philadelphia's longtime Black newspaper. And there's probably a few others that I am missing and don't remember, but Margaret has stayed very active in a number of historical and archival capacities across Philadelphia, across the state. And she, really knows the history of the AME Church from being the archivist there for many years. So tonight we're going to hear about the history of the AME Church and the importance of saving archival collections of such institutions. So Margaret, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you all thank you, Jack, for inviting me. And thanks to Mr. Moore for following up and keeping in touch and getting this all set up. So yes, I am just going to talk for a little bit about the AME history, and then my goal really is to talk about the archiving piece, and maybe I'll be able to answer some questions, but let's move along here. So Mother Bethel AME Church, the beginning. Richard Allen, the founder of Mother Bethel Church and the first bishop, who was consecrated in 1816. He, probably the background about Richard Allen. Him and his friends walked out of St. George's Church in 1787, and they decided to build their own church in 1791. And let me back up. Purchased land in 1791 and then brought the blacksmith shop in 1794. So as we always say at Mother Bethel, the AME Church, where it is located right now, is the oldest continuously owned piece of property by African Americans in the United States. This is a depiction of the blacksmith shop that was hauled to 6th and Lombard. This is not necessarily the blacksmith shop, but at least it just gives you some idea, and it's a replica of a blacksmith shop that Richard Allen had outfitted as the first church. This is the second church. We're still on that same piece of property. And of course, it's a little bit bigger church. It's a rough cast church that lasted from 1805 to 1841. Moved on to the third church. This is a brick church, a little more substantial. And it lasted from 1841 to 1899. This is the current church that we are in and have been there since 1899. So that when we do tours there, we tell people that in the inside, everything is original except for the carpeting, the globes, which used to be gas, are now electric. Sorry, I must say, I do have this artful cough. And it's been with me for, 20 years or so. And it's just affected my lungs. So I hope you'll bear with me. I do need to go on to the mural, which shows you the four churches and Richard Allen. Recently, we were appointed a new pastor. We've had 53. The 52 pastors were all males. The current one we have now is a female, Reverend Carolyn Cavanis. So she has the distinction of being the first woman in its history. So here we go. The importance of the denomination. We talk about Francis Asbury, who introduces the circuit riding and supervises the clergy on the circuit. And the reason why I have circuit riders in here is because Mr. Moore asked if I had any information on the Bristol circuit, and I don't. I have to say, I have very little about the AME churches in the Northeast. Frankly, I have very little information about any other church. Our church archives primarily documents the history of Mother Bethel Church only and its leadership. So people will call or email me to ask if we have information about XYZ church. And I'm sorry to say, I just don't have it. I look for information about your two churches, the Bethany Church, and I hope I'm saying that right, and Campbell AME Church, and I just don't have anything at all. So I've really learned a lot from Fred and Jack about the your two churches, and I'm glad I had an opportunity to talk with them because at least I have some information now. So here we go, back to the circuit riders, also known as itinerant preachers, who provided religious services to those wherever they could, but mostly in open fields. I don't want to read all of this. You can, I'm sure it's being recorded and you can read the rest on your own. I do want to point out, though, that again, that Bishop Allen was the first bishop who was elected at the 1816 convention. Bishops are the chief officers, and the bishop was the one who actually appointed our current pastor in this district. I'm sure that, again, most of you all know that there are 20 districts in the AME denomination. Each district is run by a bishop. Those 20 bishops meet together and decide on protocols and other things that are related to the running of the church. And it seems, that a lot of people wonder, well, how does that all work? And I just say, well, there are conferences that they meet and make these decisions. So I have already mentioned that Reverend Cavaniss is the 53rd pastor, and she was appointed in October of last year. And we are really quite proud of her. Again, you probably know this, that the 1816 convention was attended by 16 Christian pioneers from Philadelphia, Baltimore, Wilmington, Attleboro, and Salem. And they met at Mother Bethel. Well, at that time, it was called Bethel Church. We were not known as Mother Bethel until the 1950s, when women were allowed more duties, I should say, in the church, and they decided to add the word Mother Bethel. And however, prior to the formation of the denomination, Bethel Church struggled on its own. Nevertheless, Richard, Sarah, and the members managed to care for those who were escaping to freedom via the Underground Railroad. And it soon became clear to Richard and Sarah the importance of this newly formed denomination. Yes, indeed. I have a photo of a picture that shows that there is a door in the basement of where the museum is located. And I asked one of our elderly members, where does this door go to? She said, oh, that was part of the Underground Railroad. I had no idea. And she explained, of course, because Mother Bethel is so close to the river, obviously we're right there, 6th Street, the escaped slaves just walked up to 6th Street and found, shelter, food, and clothing at Mother Bethel, and then they would move on to the next stop. It fulfilled the following needs for the African American community. First and foremost, the religion, education. They would come to Sunday school and learn how to read and write. They got medical care. They, of course, was a place for them to meet socially. Just recently, the South Carolina club, the Georgia club, the Florida club, they no longer meet, and it just happened just recently, but up until about 10 years ago, they would meet probably monthly, and this was a way of being able to gather together and meet, and of course for protection. So there I tell you that the denomination is in 40 countries and on 5 continents and divided into 20 districts. I mentioned that each district is governed by a bishop. So I moved on to the archiving piece, which is my love and the need for it. This is my archives. I know it's I see Stephanie looking at it, but she knows how archives can be, with boxes everywhere, in archival quality boxes. But this is my life. And I know pretty much where everything is. We have what is called a finding aid, and my finding aid will tell me that certain boxes can be found in certain places. But it is, archiving is so needed. It is important to gather, preserve, and of course share. Gathering information about those in the AME church has been very, very difficult. It's just been difficult to even gather information about Mother Bethel Church because people don't want to relinquish their materials. And it's just very sad. They decide that they want to keep it at home, pass it on to their family members, and that does not always happen. Then how do they get preserved? You know, they're in shoe boxes and in attics and in basements where it's moldy and dusty and wet. And oh, well, anyway. And then once you're able to convince them to gather their materials and bring them to the archives, then it's so important to share the materials. So our Mother Bethel Archives, as I said, includes materials that document the history of Mother Bethel Church and its leaders. And the documents include printed materials, manuscripts, and photographs. We have a very good photograph collection, about 3,000 images, and they're all numbered and identified. There are also some memorabilia and audiovisual. Our printed materials are books about and by individuals in the AME denomination, but our most important piece is the Christian Recorder, a publication begun for the AME Church in 1854, and then it stopped for a little bit and started up again in 1861, and we have it to the present. Most of the older issues are bound and are currently housed at the Presbyterian Historical Society, which has been kind enough to hold some of our historical materials, because we are not equipped to actually house historical materials, and we don't have the space. Of note, you may know Judith Giesberg, who's professor of history at Villanova University, used the Christian Recorder as a foundation to build the following website: informationwanted.org. The website is used by, not used by, but it was formed that provides information about formerly enslaved people who placed ads in the Christian Recorder to search for family members stolen during slavery. I encourage everyone to take a look at that website. It has so much information for people, especially those doing genealogy work. We have manuscripts, minutes of Board of Trustees and the Steward Board, minutes of some church ministries such as Commission, Historical Commission, and Lay Organization. It is unfortunate, though, that there are large gaps in all of our minutes. Of course, people want to see the early minutes, and we just don't have them. And don't ask me, I don't know where they are. And some of the older members have no idea. And I'm sure all of you have read about the Bethel Burying Ground Project. And we owe a lot to Terry Buckaloo, who was the one who, I don't want to say found, but has documented a lot of the names of the people who are buried at the cemetery. It's, again, very unfortunate that the trustees of Mother Bethel needed money to purchase our current church and sold it to the city for $10,000. And once it was sold to the city then turned that area into a playground. And the owners of the playground, which is known as Wekaco, wanted to expand in that area. Doug Mooney, who was an architect, discovered that there were bodies buried there. And we owe a lot to him because he did a lot of research and discovered it was our burying ground. So again, I'm just so appreciative of the fact that he did come to us and say, I think I found your burying ground. I looked into our minutes and I did have that little bit of information that we did sell, the trustees did sell the land to the city so that they could buy or build this 1889 building. That's just more information there that I just went through. And there are close to, if not more than 5,000 bodies still buried there. And Terry Buckaloo has, I guess, uncovered, close to maybe 500 or 600 names and given details about their deaths, their names. And again, we just so appreciative to him about what wait a minute. So identified names of more than 2,500, that's what it is, sorry, 2,500 names that he has put on his website, and there is his website information right there. So details of archiving. How do you acquire materials? You can acquire by donation, which of course is the best. And of course you can purchase materials. Well, most archives don't have the money to do that, but they do through personal contacts, which is what I try to do, trying to talk to the members, do little workshops about how important it is to maintain your materials. And then, of course, hold workshops to educate the community. And communicating with related and similar repositories, because we have found at Mother Bethel that there are materials that talk about Mother Bethel, and actually they have some of our materials in other repositories. So we need to know who has what where so that we can document what they do have and possibly try to get them deaccessioned from that repository and have them reaccessioned into our archives. But that's, that's a long story and a lot of details that we have to work through yet. And of course, then contact families with long-standing history in the community. Once I hold a workshop, I try to give them some sense of how do you organize whatever you do have. If you're in an organization or a church, and I've been talking to a lot of churches because churches have materials everywhere and in closets again, and in filing cabinets and in people's offices. They need to be brought together to put into some organization using some of these categories. Not all fit, but you just have to make your own to make it fit. So preservation is the basic responsibility to provide adequate facilities for the protection and maintenance of archives, records, and manuscripts, just sort of like a detailed description of preserving. But the most important thing is to be able to share your materials and to have collaboration with other repositories. So again, so that one knows where what is. And we know that, again, that there are materials in all of these repositories, and we're going to try to, again, contact them and see if we can get a finding aid from them, letting us know what they do have so that we can have it in our area, so that when researchers come to our archives, they know that they need to go not only to us, but to these other places that have information about our archives. And I thank you very much. Questions?
Yes, everybody, if you would put your questions in the chat box, then we'll answer them that way. I'm going to kick it off. Margaret. When I was researching the Mother Bethel years ago, there was no firm documentation on its founding date and the date that they moved um, um, the blacksmith shop to, and the date they had services, and today you're using like specific dates. What is the documentation for those founding dates for when they moved the blacksmith shop and when they had their first services and when the church was actually founded? Is all of that like documented in specific?
In some of our minutes, yes, and then of course we got a lot from the Richard Allen's biography.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
of course, I'm sure everybody knows Richard Newman's book, um, uh, mm, when Prophet's Freedom. He's got a great book that talks about the Mother Bethel and Richard Allen.
Okay. Let's see. Somebody asked if earlier if the talk will be recorded. All the Northeast Philadelphia History Network talks are recorded and made available on our YouTube channel, the Northeast Philadelphia History Network, if you go on YouTube. So yes. Let's see. Fred, Fred, you want me to continue doing this or?
Yeah, go ahead, Jack, and you can ask the chat questions as well.
Right, that's what I'm doing. Okay.
Okay, good.
Well, I don't see any other. One person asked, have you been able to look through any family Bibles owned by older members?
No, we don't. We have Bibles, but they came to us anonymously, so we don't know, what family member they came from. No.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying. I had a question here about the cemetery, and now I can't. Oh, how big is the cemetery, and have they tried to buy it back from the city?
I don't know in footage how big it is. And no, we have not tried to buy it back from the city. Let me see. I guess it all started in like 2013 when when they wanted to renovate the playground. And when we found out that there was our cemetery there, our previous pastor, Reverend Dr. Mark Kelly Tyler, went to the city and said that we need to do a memorial there. So there is a marker, one of the blue markers indicating that this is Mother Bethel Cemetery. And we're currently trying to get a artist to do some sort of a memorial there. And the area is cordoned off, meaning that nobody can actually play on the part where they know that the cemetery is, but I don't know in footage how big it is.
Okay. I think maybe myself and Fred will take just a minute and talk about the AME churches in Northeast Philadelphia.
Oh, great.
Which grew out of Mother Bethel. So I'll start. So the first was Campbell AME in Frankfurt, and Frankfurt had a very active, small but active Black community dating to the late 18th century, and there, as in the case of Mother Bethel, there are very few or no really surviving records, archival records from the earliest years of the church. So a lot of it is oral history that's been passed down, for generations. But tradition has it that members began meeting at the home of one Sarah Congo on what is now Plum Street in Frankfurt in 1807. And began worshiping there together. And then a few years later, they purchased a building or a lot on what is now Oxford Street. Well, what was Oxford Street is now Kinsey Street in Frankfurt, and built a church. And then subsequent buildings were built on the site, and the current building dates from the 1870s, which they still use. But one of the early buildings had a stone, a date stone that said Second Bethel. And so that indicated that this was considered, the second church after Mother Bethel of the AME Church. Whether it actually was the actual second one, they called it Second Bethel. And Campbell AME is still going strong today. And its cemetery was put on the Philadelphia Historic Register through the research of Joe Mankiewicz, a local historian. He thoroughly documented the church cemetery and had it placed on the city historic register. And that nomination is very full of information. So that's a very quick summary of Campbell. I don't know, Fred, if you want to speak for a minute about Bethany Church.
Before you move on, can I ask a question?
Okay, if I can answer it.
Yeah, you said that you got a lot of the history from oral histories.
I didn't get it. When I was working for the Historical Society of Frankfurt back in the early 2000s, we did a project on the 200th anniversary of Campbell AME, which in 2007. And from the research I did and talking to people, it was just an oral tradition that the church started with members meeting at this home of Sarah Congo in 1807. I didn't myself do oral histories, but I read that was the oral tradition that had been passed down. There is no real firm documentation, but that's the tradition. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was just wondering if there were tapes or something around.
No, well, there's a couple of studies. I'll send you. I don't have them off the top of my head. On the scholarly studies of the Philadelphia Black, or of the Frankfurt Black community, which talks about all this, not just Campbell AME Church, but the Black community of Frankfurt in general. And I can send you those citations.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah. But I don't know all that much about the church other than what I just shared. So,
okay.
Yeah. Fred, you want to talk about Bethany a little?
Okay. Well, I'm not sure. I didn't get all of what you were saying, but Frankfurt was the second church in Philadelphia to become an AME church. And for a while it was called Second Bethel. Frankfurt isn't too far from Holmesburg, about 4 miles from the Campbell AME Church to the Bethany AME Church, which is on Ashton Road in what is now called Holmes Circle. At that time, it was all Holmesburg. The first record we see of Bethany, not called Bethany, but just Holmesburg, AME Church, is in 1824. But we know that there was a deed for a burial ground in 1810 for a half-acre triangle given to the colored community. Once they kind of got their act together, it was a trust, and once they were independent, that trust would go over and they would have the property. That happened in 1817. They were not yet an AME church at that time, but they were certainly some kind of a church, and surely that graveyard, that ground, had been given to them because there were probably already burials there. And this is in 1810. We can see in the 1790 census that there are some Blacks living in that area, and certainly by 1800, 1810. One in particular, Elijah Moore. The records of Bethany have been lost, as with many of the AME churches and many other churches for that matter. They do have a graveyard. And that graveyard, as I say, probably goes back to around 1800. Unfortunately, when the Northeast Airport went in 1947, they widened Ashton Road, the city, about 20 feet on that side where the church was, and disinterred. We don't know how many graves, but almost all of them, really. We don't know all the burials that were there, and we have no photographs to show what the headstone said or anything. And again, the records are gone, but it appears that they dug up the graves. And when I say they, it wasn't necessarily the city that did that. The church was given the option to do it themselves, and I think they did, from what I've heard. And they were dug up and put in a hole, all put together near the on the like the northwest side of the church today. But again, they don't have any. Their records are gone. But I think we know where a lot of the burials are, and we can go through death certificates and determine at least 80 or so people who were buried, colored people who were buried in that graveyard. AME Church is still active today, and has been part of the AME Church at least since 1824. That's the first time we see it, which there again were very few records of these conferences were taking place back in those first days. But something should be done about those burials. In this case, they're still in the graveyard. They're not on a playground or under a playground. And I'm hoping, and I know Bethany is as well, to come up with some kind of a plan to get a memorial and try to determine, some of the burials from DNA. I don't know how it might be done, but we know at least there's one colored troop, Civil War, U.S. colored troop buried there, Thomas Williams. So we need to keep working on that, and I hope we can work with Margaret and others to see that is rectified.
Yeah, the person who we originally were working with regarding Mother Bethel's burial ground has moved on, and there's a new person there now. So I'm waiting till she gets her feet wet before I pounce on her and tell her, what's happening with our artists for our burial ground. And at that time, I can certainly bring this up, and maybe we can work out something to
Great.
get a memorial done there. I'm just this talk is really more for me than it is for your group members, because I'm frantically writing notes here, and I didn't have no idea there were other Black Bethel burial grounds or AME burial grounds, particularly in the Northeast. This is just
there's
amazing.
One or two actually in Frankfurt, and one is associated with the Campbell
right.
Campbell AME, and there's another one where I think it's a public burial ground that half of it was white and half of it was black. Joe Mikovich has done some research on that, both of those churches. And then we very surely have one there on Ashton Road, just outside Holmesburg. So definitely two or three of them.
Yeah, as I said, I'm just this is just so amazing to me, because we know that Richard Allen purchased that piece of property so that, as he put it, we have notes that say to give our people a private place for burying instead of throwing us into a potter's field. That's the way it was explained. And
if I might jump in.
yes,
I'm invited. In Bensalem, there's an AME church that opened in 1830, and they have a small cemetery adjacent the church with a Civil War veteran in it.
no kidding. It's an AME church, yes?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Bensalem has a Unity Week the week of Martin Luther King Day, and 11 houses of worship participate with programs and refreshments. And I was there last year in 2023. Beautiful little structure. And I believe, I could be wrong, the pastor said the tabernacle was built by Richard Allen.
Really?
I could be wrong, but
Oh,
it
no.
had historical significance.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yeah, the
Um,
Bethany AME, the first Campbell, Bishop Campbell gave his first sermon there in 1838, I believe, at Bethany. So it has plenty of history as well. And yes, but Ben Salem was even before Bethany, and then there's Attleboro on up at Langhorne.
mhm.
And these all appear early on to be in the what was called the Bristol Circuit, and obviously Bristol, Bucks County. And I've tried to figure out more about how those circuits worked and how they operated, and how Bethany may have fit into that. When the name Bethany came on, as a matter of fact, it isn't seen until about 1911 with the burial of that colored troop, Thomas Williams. And which makes me wonder, when did some of these, many of the AME churches acquire that name? Before that, acquire a specific name. Before that, they were just called Holmesburg AME, Frankfurt AME. But then, they got some other more particular names. Hard to say when they did. I don't know.
Mhm, mhm. Um, as I said, I only learn about other churches when AME churches when people email or call and say, "Do you have information about so?" Because we don't have anything in our archives about any other AME churches. Now, our current historiographer for the AME denomination, I do believe he's going to try to go around at least Pennsylvania and start gathering information about these various churches. And then see if we can't get them to agree to gather their information and put it into a facility where all this AME material can be stored. So I don't want to say stored, but housed properly. So I'm hoping that he does that, because there's so much history about the AME denomination out there that I just don't have any idea about. I'm just fumbling here for words because I don't know. And it's just really a shame that we're losing our history about the AME denomination. I mean, I don't know how to rectify that.
Speaking of the names of the churches, there is a question on the chat. Why was the church named Bethel?
Oh, it was named Bethel by Francis Asbury, who said this is a Church of God, and we're going to name it Bethel. So it was Francis Asbury who named the first the blacksmith shop Bethel.
Okay, that's it for the chat questions. So if anybody has any others to add.
Margaret, I have a question. You mentioned a historic marker down, if I understood correctly, at the playground for where the cemetery used to be. Where exactly is that? I used to go down to the Octavius Catto event every year when they held it there, when they held it at the playground. It's now
It's 4th and Catherine, the Wekaco playground.
Oh, it's at the Wekaco playground, not the one directly across from the church.
No.
Oh, I was going to say I never noticed it, and I always every year we would go down, we would walk around and okay, fourth,
Yeah.
okay,
4th and Catherine.
4th and Catherine,
and
okay,
because that's where the Wekaco playground is located, and
okay.
part of that playground is actually part of the
That's why I didn't say it.
yeah
Thank you.
part of the cemetery.
Thank you.
And
I got a couple of questions. One, why was there an African American community in Holmesburg? Does anybody know?
That was a good question.
Well, they were there because they lived there. How they arrived, they may have been working in mills. We don't know how
Okay.
they got to there. It was, I mentioned Elijah Moore. He bought an acre lot on the hill there where Home Circle is now in 1804. This fellow named, well, can't remember his name right now, but he had purchased a lot of land there and was selling lots. Around the same time, John Home was starting to sell lots down in Holmesburg. This guy, can't remember his name right now, but at any rate, he was selling, acre lots. And Elijah Moore was one of the first ones. It's right at where today's Old Ashton Road cuts off of Ashton Road. And Ashton Road went in right about that time, 1804. So there was something going on, and you almost think that maybe there were some people who were thinking about having a Black community there. It wasn't just Black people that were buying the lots, but in the end, that was a Black, became a Black community, and it still barely is. But for much of the 18th, 19th century, it was Black and got larger and larger.
I know they said it goes way back. I was just wondering if it was like tied to a particular like industry or a mill or somebody's estate that had people working for them or something like that.
I think it was in a place that they were allowed to live freely. And
Okay.
so they were starting to show up. They could have gotten there from a mill, but there were no big, it wasn't a big mill there. There was a sawmill down on Wooden Bridge Run. But they were welcome, and they had been given this land, this half acre for a burial ground. So somebody
Who gave them the land? Do we know?
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, who gave him the land?
we did well. A guy named Marple, David Marple. He wasn't a Quaker. As a matter of fact, he was a Baptist. He's buried here at this church. I'm at the Pennyback Baptist tonight, but he was not a Quaker. There's some talk about Quakers had freed their slaves, and that's where they came from. That isn't true. It isn't. There were not that many Quakers in Lower Dublin Academy, Lower Dublin Township. So I'd say they just kind of maybe there was a mill there. A couple of them worked at, and I don't know. Wish I were get back there and I could ask these guys, how'd you get here?
No, you were talking about the circuit riders. Were the circuit riders just for the AME church? Were the AME circuit riders?
The Methodist Church had circuit riders.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Plenty of churches had circuit riders.
Yeah,
you have to share.
Particularly, this was a route for the AME churches. Was that the deal?
That was one way of doing it out in the sticks. Each church couldn't afford a pastor. They weren't large enough. They were meeting in people's houses. So you probably had a guy coming out from Mother Bethel, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Richard Allen. That was his thing. He walked from place to place. He talks about that. Walked from here to New Jersey to Delaware. I think he even ventured down into Maryland a little bit to preach the word.
Well, I know I went to the Methodist church one time that Third and I think it's down around Third and Vine. And they explained like why Methodism came to be. And part of the thing with Methodism was it sprouts off from the Anglican Church or the Episcopal Church, but the Episcopal Church didn't have enough ministers or enough priests, so they had to use these circuit. They had to use lay preachers to basically spread the word, spread the gospel, and that's where the circuit riders came from.
Mhm. Mhm.
We should also mention that there are other Black cemeteries in the Northeast. There's one up at that was part of Byberry Friends meeting. Graveyard was sectioned off, and a lot of work is being done now to figure out how many burials might be there. We don't know. It was started by the as I say, Byberry Friends around 1780, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's on the property, or soon will be, we hope, on the property of Benjamin Rush State Park. Jack may have some more information on that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And Jackie Wiggins, who's on the call here, is part of the Society for the Preservation of Philadelphia African American Assets. They're working, and Preservation Alliance, we're all working on a plan to restore and honor that small burial ground. I also want to mention that somebody is chiming in on the chat, Shirley Coursey from the Bethel AME Church in Yardley, Bucks County. Their church was built in 1877. She wanted to share that with the group.
Yeah, I wish y'all would send me that information so that I can add it into for those who are on this call. If you are a member of an AME church, please let me know so that I can add this information into our files.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add that the name of the group is the with everyone, Jack and others, Byberry Township African American Burial Ground. Deborah Gary, who's the founder of SPA, this Quaker burial ground, and we only have one name, Jim Walton, but we are working on that. So thanks for bringing that up, Jack.
Hey, Jackie, how you doing?
I'm good. Hey, Mark.
Everybody's reconnecting. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to mention Shirley Coursey. I was up to see her at Bethel AME Church in Yardley. They're called the Gather Place. Has a wonderful museum there, and she and I spent a half hour or so talking one Sunday afternoon, and we're going to go visit the church in Langhorne, which was one of the Attleboro at the time was one of the 5 churches that formed the AME Church back in 1816. And they were in the Bristol circuit as well. And we're working on trying to figure out how that Bristol circuit operated. So I'm looking forward to meeting with Shirley Coursey again.
Oh, good. That would be good. And as I said, whatever you find out, jot some stuff down so that I can put it in the archives. Because I didn't know anything about the Bristol circuit until it was mentioned to me. Fred mentioned it. I said, oh, what in the world? I did not know. So, as I said, I'm getting more out of this than you all are getting out of me. So this is wonderful. This exchange of information that I desperately need and hope that I could share with other people.
That's why we do these things. Networking. We are called the Northeast Philadelphia History Network, and that's exactly what we do is network.
Yes, you certainly are.
There's another question about the Salem, New Jersey church, which was listed on your list of places, I think, in your
Yes,
presentation.
of places where they first met in 1816.
Right. So Muriel Kirkpatrick would like to know more about that.
That would be nice. I would like to.
Okay.
I would like to know too.
So maybe they can contribute to your knowledge too.
Yes, please. As I said, I had my email up there, and if you go back and look at it, please email me and let me know what you find out. And I'll be happy to share what little I know, which is very little.
Shirley
Very
Coursey.
embarrassing.
No, this is what happens when history is just kind of all around us and nobody puts it all together. So this network thing is very important to us. Shirley Coursey, you had asked to be unmuted. Were you unmuted? If not, I think you can unmute yourself down in the corner. But while she's typed, there's a Quaker burying ground in Yardley called the State Hill Burying Ground, where Black people are buried and Black Civil War veterans are also in there. And she looks forward to working with Fred for these AME churches in Bucks County.
Oh, great.
I asked Shirley to unmute, and if she'll do that, well.
You know, a couple of y'all have mentioned some Civil War things, and I would ask if those of you that have information on any of the men who served in the U.S. Colored Troops, if you can get that to Fred, Fred can get it to me. At the GAR Museum at the new location, 8110 Frankfurt Avenue. We've been working for some time on collecting information. We're up to about 553 men who served in the U.S. Colored Troops, gathering that information for them. And Fred recently has identified a fellow in the Bethany Church there. So if any of you do have any, I know it's a little specific, we're all talking about history in general, but since I heard Civil War veterans mentioned a few times. So if you have the information on a particular Black soldier, please, if you can get that to Fred, Fred can get it to me, and I can pursue that research. There's a few of us on here, Tom Donnelly, Mary Weibel, and I who volunteer at the GAR Museum. We do research in that area, so we can maybe help and then see if they're tied into any particular AME church, and then get that information back to you. So thank you.
Have you checked with the Union League of Philadelphia? They
I have.
funded colored troops during the Civil War.
Yeah, thank you.
They have rosters of the companies that they funded.
Yeah, well, our goal is specific to GAR posts. We have that information. The military information is one thing. We're trying to identify them to a GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic post. There were 3 Black posts in Philadelphia and one over in Camden, Robeson Post 51. But and Margaret may know this, the Bethel Church has a mural up front. I'm trying to remember when I was in there. Up front and way up to the left, there's a stained glass window there, memorializing. I see you nodding your head, Margaret, so you're aware of that. Memorializing the 3 Black GAR posts that were in Philadelphia. So we're trying to connect them there specifically, not so much to a regiment or anything like that. That information we are able to get, and you're correct. The Union League has that. We're trying to identify them and connect them to a Grand Army of the Republic post. And that's what we're up to, 553 men who were members of a GAR post. But thank you.
That's Walt Lafty with the GAR Museum, Library and Museum that's now in Holmesburg. So in case people aren't aware of that, Tom Donnelly was on earlier. Any other questions?
It looks like that's it. There's some references to other churches, but no question, and some more information in the chat. But I think we're kind of running over time, right, Fred? So
Yeah,
Oh, my
I think
goodness, yeah.
yep, it's 8 o'clock and we're right on time.
That's very
on
good.
time. Yeah.
Fred, is it possible for you to gather the information in the chat and send it directly to Margaret?
Yes.
Yes, I could.
Okay,
The chat is part of this. The whole presentation is being recorded, and part of that is the chat, and I could send that everything in the chat to Margaret. Yes.
Great.
Thank you
Because
very
it
much.
looks like there's a lot of good information in there. Margaret,
Yes.
thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you very much. As I said, I got more out of this than you got out of me. So
I will
appreciate it.
say that this is livelier than many of the discussions afterwards. So don't feel badly about you getting more than anybody here got, because I
No,
think it was
seriously,
mutual.
I appreciate this. Thank you all.
Great to see you, Margaret.
Great to see you too.
Now,
Take care,
next
everyone.
month, it's not going to snow or rain. There'll be no bad weather forecast. So we'll be back here at Pennypack Baptist. And I believe our speaker is Jack. Can you tell us who the speaker is?
Marjorie Sly, who was also the director of the Urban Archive.
Presbyterian the Urban Archive.
Margaret, did Marjorie succeed you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we're having the pleasure of having 2 long-term directors of the Urban Archives or Special Collections Research Center at Temple University
Yeah.
Libraries. Marjorie's going to speak on In Her Own Right, which is an archival project on Philadelphia women writers in honor of Women's History Month. You know, this month's program was in honor of Black History Month. So yeah, it's kind of very unusual that we would have in succession two former directors of the Special Collections Research Center at Temple University. So that's the way it worked out.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, that'll be a program on female Philadelphia female women writers, authors.
Okay, I think that's it. This is, as I mentioned, being recorded, and we'll have it up on YouTube in a couple of days. And we'll keep working on this. It's, vital.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Margaret.
All right.
You
Goodbye.
take care.
Margaret.